Evening, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Ballot, where politics meet real life. We break down state and federal issues, showing how policy shapes everyday Americans and more. Engaged, balanced, and informative, that's our promise. Now, this is a bit different, but I'm your co host, Muhammad Alec. We don't have Mikkel in here yet. He will be joining shortly. But today, the big topic of the day, as many people have been aware of and talking about, is the U.S. and Israel striking Iran in the Iranian counterattacks on Muslim countries more than the counterattacks on Israel. Now, a big thing that we're going to be getting into this episode is why Iran was striking non-Israeli targets primarily, and why the United States in general also made these targeted attacks in the first place. So, the U.S.-Israel coordinated operation against Iran, which was launched February 28th to mark the end of the month, was dubbed Operation Epic Fury by the U.S. and Operation Roaring Lion by Israel. Now, I like to think that probably Pete Hesgift came to the name of it, of Epic Fury. You guys know that he is a bit of an edgelord. But it has entered a widening phase with no sign of immediate de-escalation. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and approximately 48 other senior regime figures remain confirmed killed in the initial strikes, enabled by months of CIA intelligence tracking his location and movements. Now, this was shared with Israeli counterparts and reportedly augmented by deep Mossad penetration into Iranian networks in leadership circles. This allowed precise real-time information on a senior officials meeting in Tehran to reach Trump administration and Israeli planners before full public confirmation or broader regime awareness. Now we have Mikkel coming in here. Welcome, Mikkel, and put you on the left-hand side because you are the host. Nice to see you. It's nice
Pleasure, everyone.
to host
Pleasure, Muhammad. Hope everyone's having a good day. Got the little one with me today.
He's a cutie
But
pie.
where were you? I want to start. Well, actually, Muhammad, if you want to finish off, and
Yeah,
then
I'll keep going with what I was
yeah, keep
saying.
going. Yeah, you're doing
So,
good. Thank
ongoing U.S. and Israeli airstrikes continue to maintain air superiority over Tehran and other targets, while Iran and proxies, including Hezbollah, have intensified retaliatory missile and drone barrages hitting Israel and U.S.-linked bases in the Gulf and energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, if you want to be an American about it, which I do prefer.
you.
U.S. military casualties now stand at 4, but this is actually confirmed to be 6 just a few hours
Yeah,
ago,
6. Yep.
and have been killed and 5 seriously wounded, with the 6th death confirmed today, actually by CENTCOM and NPR reporting from
Hmm.
Kuwait-based forces. Additional civilian and military deaths include over 555 in Iran, cited by the Iranian Red Crescent figures, which include 168 at an elementary school near a military site, which included a primarily female child students. And then
Yeah.
from there, also between 9/11 and 9 to 11 in Israel, 31 between 9/11 casualties in Israel and 31 in Lebanon from Israeli responses, and multiple reports of explosions causing casualties in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Doha. Qatar has been drawn deeper into the conflict after sustaining direct Iranian strikes on its energy facilities and civilian infrastructure, prompting defensive actions, including the downing of inbound Iranian aircraft and a full halt in Qatar energy LNG production. While not formally aligning offensively, Doha has condemned the Iranian attacks as a violation of sovereignty and retains its hosting of the largest U.S. base in the region. So, Mikhail, what do you think about, based off of just this initial news that has been coming out, what do you think about this situation and what's your take on it?
I think the situation is only going to get worse as, we'll dive further into it. But as the Iranian regime, the new regime, will not continue to negotiate with the Trump administration. I think that is
No.
something that the Trump administration didn't see coming in a sense. They probably thought, we'll bomb Iran over you know, long salvo of missiles, and that would deteriorate them, and that would prompt an overthrowment of the government. And now we're seeing that is not the case. And also some new news. Apparently, one of the generals who was putting together the strikes actually had two options. One option was a small, limited strike, which is what Trump has been pushing previous to the strikes that happened. And then there was the big, massive strike as well. JD Vance was one that supported the big strike, where the actual general was cautioned that if the big strike happened, they do not know what could precipitate from that. And that's really
Yeah.
what we've seen here. They dropped that big, huge bomb and killed, I believe, 40, around 35, 40 top Iranian leaders. as well within those groups were individuals that apparently Trump was seeking to succeed the Ayatollah that has passed, well, that was killed by the Trump administration and Israel operation as well. So, with all of that, it's going to be a prolonged conflict, in my opinion. He says 4 weeks, but I think it's going to be longer than that.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
mean,
especially with the Iranian counterattacks on the other Middle Eastern countries, the American bases they have, the
yeah,
Saudi Arabian
yeah,
officials. So Saudi Arabia is a very authoritative government, to say the least, and so essentially nothing comes out of the country media-wise if it's not by the approval of the upper hands of the government. And an official speaking on behalf of the government, essentially due to that kind of proxy between the top to the media, has said that the Saudi Arabians are rethinking about their support and
yes.
alliance with the United States
Hmm.
because once Iran began to do their counterstrikes, the United States used all of its interceptor missiles to defend Israel, but left the Saudi Arabian and Middle Eastern countries like Bahrain, Doha, and
Yeah,
Qatar completely defenseless and allowed them to just get bombed by Iran. And so this is the second time in recent history in in the first year of Trump's presidency where the Middle East has had this issue occur. The last time being when Israel directly bombed Qatar. Israel bombed Qatar while they were trying to host peace talks for Palestine. And luckily enough for the Trump admin, nobody got killed in that strike
yeah,
because they went to pray and they weren't in the meeting room, which was what got bombed. And
yeah.
that was the saving grace of that whole situation. But now, as the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So it'll be interesting
Or
to
the
see.
Bush, the Bush quote that he says.
Yeah,
Bush's quote where he botches that whole entire main quote up. All right, buddy, come on.
it is really funny. It's in that J. Cole song as a sample.
Yes,
We
yeah,
got a
yeah.
saying in Texas. I know it's in Tennessee, probably in Texas. Fool me once, shame on you.
But even
Fool me twice, you won't fool me again.
yeah,
It's
something
not.
like that. But it seems that like with Qatar as well, that Qatar and the Saudis with the the alleged, I want to say, Iranian missile strike that hit the Saudis' oil refinery. I was looking into it a little bit before I got here, however, but give me 1 second.
Take your time.
Okay.
And I'll pick it up while Mikkel is
Do
on
they
this
have
phone call.
the
So going forward from there, President Trump
circle
speaking
one
today at
that's
his
like
first
longer?
public
Maybe
interview
that is
since the
long.
strikes
Yeah.
began and in follow-up
It's just we
interviews
just have to
actually
cut it off again.
stated that he is not ruling out sending
Things where I have
American
on the
boots
back.
on the ground. Now, what we're going to be really looking at here is what happens if United States troops actually go into Iran. What we saw last time was that when we pulled up with our boots on the ground and really going for the militaristic
I think it
invasion or
would be enough.
occupation,
I think it's
is that we
okay.
were in
You can like
Afghanistan
the long
and in
sausage looking
Iraq
thing.
for more than two
Yeah, I
decades.
think
And
that
that
would be
was
enough because I think
slowly
if you
but
just
surely
cut
became
it
a
and just nah.
very, very unpopular war, to say the least, in the United States, with many people getting very upset about it, and to the point where Joe Biden finally pulled everyone out of Afghanistan, and then the Taliban immediately took over. And now what we saw then is that without the United States' direct involvement, putting in all those resources in Afghanistan, the country itself just essentially reverted back to what we feared. And it showed that the United States hadn't actually, one, isn't good at country building, two, isn't good at government building, and three, has for the most part, only something to lose by putting itself in these situations because we went in there with the intention of changing the government to be more pro West and more pro America and Israel. And then it got back to us being the moment we stopped spending all that money, it became very clear that this was not something that was going to be beneficial or helping for the American people. So
Okay.
Trump said today recently, sending American boots on the ground into Iran, if they are necessary, will occur. Telling the Post, I don't have the yips with respect to the boots on the ground. Like every president says, there will be no boots on the ground. But I don't say that. I say probably don't need them, but if they're necessary. As Mikhail was saying, he reiterated that the operation could last 4 to 5 weeks or 4 weeks or less. But out of that, we can go far longer than that. Now, take in mind find that the United States has already gone through about a quarter to 35% of their interceptor missile Tomahawk
Yes,
supply.
which is very important to note. And even kind of like the point that I was getting to before my girlfriend called me, we're trying to get some more food for our doggy. So we had to make sure we had to get the right stuff. But what I was getting to in my points is that with the Qatar oil refinery, is that apparently it's being stated and reported that it was actually Israel was the one that fired that shot, that missile that hit the oil refinery as a false flag
I
operation.
heard that report too.
So I'm hearing this and I'm like, that doesn't surprise me, honestly, at all. And what Muhammad was continued to saying about the 4 week timeline, it's I mean, we've heard this time and time again with Iraq, short operation months, things of that nature. And we see how these conflicts can get prolonged. And that's been another important point that a lot of the military generals and even the conversation I was talking about that the one general was having with Vance and President Trump regarding the different options that they had. The general was very hesitant on the large scale bombardment because it would so adversely run out our missile supplies and interceptor supplies while having to protect other entities as well. And obviously, we're not using those for Qatar and all the other Arab countries. They're really just for the U.S. military and Israel um, as well. But even with all that information, Trump still went ahead and had the big, huge strike done. And we're seeing a lot of the ramifications from that. I mean, even the reports from Wall Street Journal and Axios and others confirmed that even U.S. Central Command used Anthropic's Claude AI, the same AI that they banned on Friday, the same AI company that stood up against them to not use their AI for things of this nature. But however, the model was used for intelligence assessments, target identification, and battle simulations in the initial strikes that killed Khamenei. Hours after President Trump had banned the tool across federal agencies. So even as this dispute with the company over its ethical restrictions, which is still mind-boggling to say the least, because they just don't want to use their AI for military and autonomous purposes. But it's just interesting to see that they still went ahead and used this AI. So I'm sure there may be some levels of legal cases brought up from Claude, giving that yes, they were banned, but they still used their AI for this operation. And then adding on to it, Pentagon officials have confirmed additional U.S. forces are deploying to the region with Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dane Kane warning of expected further casualties. This live update tests the Trump administration's peace through strength doctrine. Um, as they've been talking about with the post 2024 election as a form of diplomacy, which has basically collapsed amid Iran's 2025 and 2026 protests crackdown. The discussion will weigh whether this is a necessary response to nuclear or proxy threats or a risky escalation lacking a clear off ramp, which Trump has been talking about and has wanted, and even Qatar and other Arab countries are now even looking to push the president for a more off ramp approach for the conflict with Iran, because these other Arab countries, they can't take the level of bombardment, and especially feeling left behind and betrayed by the United States. It's kind of like you would think that they put themselves in this situation realistically, because both Israel and Qatar and the Saudis were pushing Trump to do this initially, and there was even reporting that the Saudis had invested heavily into the Trump administration and even into Jared Kushner and business pals, and that was another pushing for Iran to strike, for the United States and Israel to strike Iran. Other instances, just going on the internet and diving through various pieces of research from various individuals, whether it's in CIA and FBI, individuals have stated that Israel has actually went up to Trump prior to all of these things happening and stated that if you don't make a move on Iran, we as in Israel will make the move on Iran, but we won't use ballistic missiles. We'll use nukes. So that was the apparent threat that was tossed around before all of this escalation really started. So even when you look at it on the political sentiments and voters and constituents, they don't agree with this at all.
Oh yeah,
I
only
mean,
27% of American adults support this attack against Iran. I mean, the Pentagon actually told Congress Iran was not planning on attacking the United States first. So the whole argument of, oh well, we were just doing a the Israeli line, we had to attack first for self defense because they would have attacked us anyway. Well, the Pentagon explicitly said, no, that wasn't true. Iran was not planning on attacking American bases, nor America as
yep,
a general. Iranian missiles can't even reach Western Europe or
yeah, they can't
Eastern
even reach
China.
them.
How are they going to cross the Pacific or Atlantic to reach us? They literally don't have the capabilities. The few countries that do have those capabilities are China and Israel and Russia. Literally,
Exactly.
and we are gung ho supporting Israel. And they've roped us into this situation. And I really do think that this massive support for Israel is going to cost the Republicans a lot going forward politically.
Oh,
I mean,
so much going forward.
Even Bush didn't get roped into this.
Yeah, he learned, well, not learned, he knew better to not do that. But I mean, history will see him as a better foreign policy president than Trump, depending upon how this fully is hashed out and what continues to happen within the region. And wanting to give some historical and immediate background to really what's going on, so our listeners have not only a up to date knowledge of what's going on, but also the historic information behind it as well. So, core background. So, there's decades of tensions since 1979. You had the JCPOA withdrawal in 2018. You had the Soleimani strike in 2020. And you had limited June 2025 strikes and the 2025-2026 Iranian protests featuring economic collapse, mass regime violence. Death toll estimates between 3,000 to 43,000. I know that's a large number, but that's just where that estimate sits at. And also, not to mention, there were those internet blackouts that were going on as well. And then you have January, February 2026, naval buildup of two carrier strike groups collapsed. The collapse Oman and Geneva nuclear talks. And then February's 24th State of the Union address by President Trump with the accusations setting the stage. No U.S. intelligence, as we have mentioned numerous times, has indicated an imminent threat from Iran on American forces before the strikes. Per multiple Pentagon briefings to Congress reported by Reuters, Associated Press, and even CNN. Approximately 2,000 targets, including nuclear sites like Natanz remnants, missile production, naval assets, and command centers have been hit, with ISW/CTP assessments confirming priorities of air defense, suppression, retaliation, degradation, and command disruption. So the precision of the opening strike on Khamenei stemmed from layered intelligence, including reports of Mossad assets and deep infiltration within Iranian leadership and operational circles. That fed critical meeting details to U.S. and Israeli decision makers in advance. Analysis notes that Israel conducted a reported strike on Iran on June 13th, 2025, interrupting talks that were underway, while the February 2026 operation followed similar logic realistically. U.S. and Israeli planners assumed a rapid collapse after decapitating 48 top figures, including Khamenei himself, modeled on elements of the 2026 Venezuelan operation against Maduro and the 2020 strike against Soleimani. And I think that was like a few years ago in Trump's first administration. So they really thought it was just going to be the same, wash, rinse, repeat strategy from, both instances, to that Iran would fall the same exact way. And that's not happening. Iran is standing strong. Its leadership is changing over time, as we're seeing and seeing in the news constantly, and they are not backing down, and they are willing to go through a long, hard fight. And I wonder if the United States is really set up for that, given the levels of bombardments that we've already done so far.
And I mean, I think the most interesting thing to see really will be how the Arabic countries go about this, because this is the, as we mentioned earlier, the second time that the United States has clearly favored Israel over them. And there's always been that bad blood between the Arabic countries, except for the UAE, with Israel, because the Arabic countries are very strongly opinionated when it comes to Palestine. And with Saudi Arabia even going to say that if Israel continues and it tries to annex what the West Bank, it'll be in a sense the end of it. View trying to be a peacemaker in the situation because they see Israel as just being an aggressor, and we've seen the large amounts of difficulty going forward with it, with the Qatar strike being a very clear example of how things are just how the United States is fine with not helping these Middle Eastern countries at all when they said, hey, we'll help defend you guys as countries if you ally with us and allow us to put our bases on your land so we can stretch out our militaristic strength. And the United States is the only country that has that strategy as a means of growing its strength. China does not have military bases around the world. It does not.
No.
We are the only country that has our bases in as many countries as we do, because that's a part of U.S. imperialism, is putting down our bases through diplomacy and then using that diplomacy and militaristic strength to promise these countries that we are going to be able to protect them, and that this will also allow us to bring more negotiating tactics and better negotiating to the diplomatic table. And now that is just seemingly going to getting more and more further from the truth, is what these Middle Eastern countries are seeing, that, well, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if the United States actually has your back, because they're going to have Israel's back more than they have yours. So then there's always been that talk of greater Israel, which multiple figures of the Israeli government, including Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and more, have stated that is the goal of what they want to do. And greater Israel requires taking Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey, Egypt, all very
Yeah.
large United States allies, especially Saudi Arabia. Egypt is the second largest receiver of foreign and economic aid from us, because we give them massive amounts of economic aid to basically say, hey, this is what we're willing to give you money just so you don't complain about what's going on with Israel and what they're doing. And it works. But when Egypt is facing threats to sovereignty, when Saudi Arabia is facing threats to sovereignty, these countries are thinking, well, can we really rely on the United States of America to actually back up their word? And they've seen twice in a row now they can't. The United States is going to protect Israel more than anything. And what does that mean for the future of our countries? And now even we've had Israel come out and say that Turkey is the next major threat to it
Yeah.
after Iran. So now Turkey isn't Iran. It
Yeah.
isn't at all.
NATO country too. NATO country too.
Not fully in NATO, but it is European allied, and that's a big thing. Iran
It's
is
gonna
known.
be
Saudi Arabia, many of the other Middle Eastern countries hate Iran for multiple reasons. Aside from the militaristic proxies they have, there's also the Sunni Shia split, which forces also a lot of religious tensions aside from that. So you got the mixture of religious tensions, you got the mixture of difference in culture, you've got the mixture of also just this militaristic issues, which is the primary issue. And then you've got going on, well, of course, we're going to go with these other countries that are saying that they'll protect us and help us get rid of this thorn in our side. But now they're throwing us to the side or throwing us under the bus, while this country is, while we're helping them deal with this issue that they promised they'd also help us deal with. Now it's clear they're not going to help us with it. Turkey doesn't have any of those issues that Iran has. Turkey is viewed
no.
favorably by Europe, viewed favorably by the Middle East, and it is a economic powerhouse, not to the strength of America, of course, not the militaristic strength of America either. But Turkey is not Iran. It is far more influential and powerful. And the reason why Israel wants to get rid of Turkey, aside from the Greater Israel Project, is because Turkey is also one of the few countries that is very against Israel, even though America has tried to court it aside from that.
Yeah.
So I really want to see what the hell the plan is from here on out.
It's gonna be
Aside
a
from
wing
getting
it plan,
America
honestly.
involved in a shit show, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
They're just gonna wing it as it goes, honestly. Like Trump wants a fast off ramp because he literally thought that everything would just collapse, new person would come in, everything would just start flowing regularly, like how things happened in Syria and as well as with
I'll be
Venezuela.
right back. I gotta get some water and food.
Yeah.
Break my fast.
But that's not the case. That's not the case at all. And while all of this is continuously going on separately, Senator Lindsey Graham has joined President Trump in publicly pushing for regime change in Cuba, with the two posing together in recent photos and statements framing Havana as the next as the next target in a wider push against adversarial governments. Graham has also stated that the true purpose of removing the current Iranian regime is that its collapse could promote Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel as the Jewish state, as Saudi Arabia is considered the center of Islam, noting that the two holy cities of Islam in Saudi Arabia, Mecca and Medina, will eventually have to recognize Israel, framing this as a broader regional dynamics often referred to as the Greater Israel Project, a lot to what Muhammad was just speaking to. And we saw during the One Israel press conference, they had makeups of how Greater Israel would look and the design that Netanyahu wants to push on the Middle East. And Israeli officials have stated, as Mohammed was saying, that Turkey is now viewed as the next major strategic threat after Iran, with some Knesset members and analysts framing Erdogan's regional as ambitions as the new Iran. This rhetoric is greatly fueling speculation on various outlets that it could feed into President Trump's longstanding criticism of NATO burden sharing and alliance dynamics, raising questions about broader U.S. efforts to pressure or destabilize elements of the transatlantic partnership. Emerging news and research highlights significant intelligence and policy disputes. Reuters and Associated Press sources reported the CIA and Pentagon briefings to Congress stating Iran had no plans to strike first, as we've been saying, and remained open to U.S. demands during indirect Oman and Geneva talks, including on enrichment and proxies. Trump's assertions about the near-term Iranian homeland range missiles were explicitly called unsupported or exaggerated by the U.S. intelligence community, and this is also what Marco Rubio was stating as well. The CIA has also reportedly warned pre-strike that removing commanding and top leadership could lead to replacement by hardline IRGC elements, potentially complicating regime change goals rather than easing them. And that's literally what we're seeing here now. We're seeing a lot of the things that these experts have been touting to the Trump administration and advising them, and they have gone completely against it. And to now we're in this chaos and cataclysm of aggression and military action without even congressional approval, which that vote is slated to take place Wednesday, which is kind of like the Trump administration just doing, honestly, whatever it wants at the request of Israel. That's really what it is. I mean, the Saudi prince and Israel both made private phone calls to Trump pushing him for this attack. And they're the ones that need to own this, not Americans. And now we have 6 Americans killed for actions that Americans shouldn't even be involved in.
Literally can't affect us at all, except for the bases that we have there. And the only reason they attack those bases, according to the Pentagon itself, is because we attack them.
Yeah, and Iranian's new regime that is forming is stating that America is no longer safe. There's reports of Iranian sleeper cells activating, all of these things of this nature. And on top of it all, you have them shutting down the Strait of Hormuz indefinitely. And quoted from Iran themselves, they're not going to let one drop of oil leave the region. Now, when I left this morning, gas was probably about like 287. Good. Leaving today, gas went up to a little bit to 307, 299. So prices will be going up drastically. Brent crude oil has surged between 8 to 13% to roughly $79 to $82 per barrel, its highest since 2025. With West Texas Intermediate following suit and natural gas rising 23 to 40% amid fears of a full Strait of Hormuz closure that handles 20% of global oil and LNG. Asian and then Western markets opened poorly despite the weekend launch timing, and stock markets have declined while gold and the dollar have strengthened, raising inflation concerns that could delay Federal Reserve interest cuts.
And I want to add, just to add to this price of oil, in the last 2 days, it went up 15%.
Yeah, basically.
The last 2 days. Now, since then, since that big pump up, it's gone down 4.5%, but 15% in 2 days is nothing to just write off. And the thing is, a lot of people are trying to justify this move by saying, "Oh, well, China relies on Iranian and Venezuelan oil
Yeah, so I was gonna get to that.
massively."
Yeah.
Yeah, so and the big issue with that is that China also has a lot more green and renewable energy than we do. The United States is the largest relier on oil in the entire world. So the global oil supply, it's a global market. So it's all just tied in together. We've talked about before how OPEC is essentially the one who controls the prices because it's
Yeah.
the oil producing countries that come together. Now, America is the largest oil producing nation, but even if we were to stop, let's just say hypothetically, we decide to stop sending all of our oil and we just use it domestically. And that's going to have a reverberating domino effect across the global oil market, where then the global market price goes up because now other countries need it, and then it's also going to deal with Iranian oil being closed because of this attacks and the Strait of Hormuz being closed,
Yeah.
and more. It's just not going to be an effect that affects China like people are optimistic that it will.
Yeah, and just to give everyone like a more not a more in-depth background, because Mommy did a great job, but just some numbers for everything. Iran and Venezuela together supplied nearly 17% of China's crude oil imports in 2025, with almost all Iranian exports and more than half of Venezuelan barrels going to Beijing. So the dual disruptions now force Chinese refiners to accelerate shifts toward Russian suppliers and other alternatives at potentially higher cost, highlighting Beijing's energy security vulnerabilities and enhancing U.S. strategic leverage in global energy markets. So the human costs continue to mount on top of everything, with the focus on Iran, China, Russia, all of those. There's still human costs continue to mount with civilian deaths in Iran and thousands of miscalculations across the board. It's going to be hard to find out what exactly those true numbers are.
It'll be interesting
And
to see where things go.
yeah, it'd be interesting to see where things go, and as well on the U.S. side, those levels of casualties, because as we all know, Republicans held Benghazi over Clinton's head for decades. So I wonder if this is something that Democrats could do the same in a certain manner. But yes, there
Well,
was
we
a
both know the Democrats are dumb as hell and terrible with messaging.
yes, but hopefully they can get their huevos all can muster up some strength. They're going to need to.
Hopefully.
Honestly, they're going to have to be. They're going to have to restructure the world in a certain way, politically, culturally, and even militarily, depending upon all that happens.
I
Actually,
mean, I could just see the commercials now if they were actually smart about it. Trump, no new wars, no new wars. Let's end the
yeah.
wars, and
I mean,
then
yeah, he
six
said it
service
during
members dead as Iran attacks America in retaliation.
literally United America first or Israel first. Boom. I mean,
Seriously,
that's it right there. That's literally it right there. And I was watching a very an educational video. Actually, it was a professor from a few years back, and he was kind of basically hit the nail on the head for everything that's happened now. It's he stated Trump would win 2024. He'll start a war with Iran, and his last prediction has me worried. His last prediction was that we would lose. We would
probably.
lose that
I
battle, and it would just shift everything around on the global scale completely, just
mean, if we
completely on
lose
the
the
global
Middle
scale.
East, if we lose the Middle East, that's going to be big, really big.
It's going to be huge, and kind of like we were talking about how the generals were stating the various options and worrying about the use of military artillery, interceptors, missiles, things of that nature. A new major risk highlighted in today's Daily Mail reporting and Wall Street Journal analysis is the severe cost asymmetry in air defense, compounded by dwindling stockpiles. So, for Iranian drones can be produced for as little as $35,000 each, while intercepting a single one can cost Western forces anywhere from 500,000 to 4 million, or up to 15 million for high-end THAAD interceptors. On the global scale, the chaos in Iran, combined with partial U.S. control over Venezuela oil production and exports following the January 2026 capture of Maduro and subsequent U.S. oversight of PDVSA operations and tank seizures, has major implications for China, and also major implications for the United States if we keep using our interceptors in this way and manner. As you can see, the Iranians can just keep, making all of these inexpensive drones. And I say 35,000 is expensive compared to the 500,000 interceptor, but this is a long out fight that they can go for. And I've seen reports of around 60 to 90 days that they are willing to continue to push on. So we gave a timeline of 4 weeks. So they're already thinking ahead of us in terms of the prolongtivity of
Yeah.
this operation. And also, what I was reading was that they're using, I think it might be in the notes, but I believe they've been using certain levels of trackers and scanners and jammers to basically jam a lot of the U.S. Radars and being able
They've
to
been
use
targeting the US radars.
and be
Yeah.
able to use that to locate at various assets, individuals, and that's why their targets are more, you could say, um, their targets are more narrow and precise in a sense compared to United States, just wild string of leveled bombardments across all of Iran, realistically.
Yeah, and what I really want to see what goes on from here is how much the United States is willing to use its stockpile of munitions for the sole purpose of attacking Iran and defending
Yeah,
Israel.
Pentagon is very, very, very worried about that. They're raising alarms that the conflict could spiral completely out of control if Iranian attacks continue at their current intensity. I mean, they said they're going to keep it up. They're Seems like they're going to keep it up.
And keep in mind, these missiles and more require rare earth metals and minerals that China exports to the world.
Yeah,
And
and I found the piece where I was that about the whole jammer and stuff. So it's Iran's war strategy. It's straightforward. Blind U.S. forces by taking out radar installations, then fire low-cost, low-end missiles and drones at various targets to deplete U.S. Air Force interceptors. Once U.S. air defense batteries run out of ammunition, then Iran will launch the larger and more dangerous hypersonic missiles and even ballistic missiles. And another TikTok that I was listening to is this CIA individual. He was speaking very bluntly and said that with these hypersonic missiles, can a U.S. Air car- U.S. carrier basically survive one of them being hit? And he was like, no. And these things are almost the size as cities. I think 19 football fields, 20. I think it's
the aircraft
25,000.
carriers are damn
I think it's
big.
25,000 troops are stationed on a single one. So just imagine if after these 4 weeks or whatever, this strategy that Iran is using, they continue to use, and then they just boom hit. Let's just say the USS USS Lincoln gets hit with a hypersonic missile, goes down. It's like we have to start thinking of these instances, and I'm 1,000% sure that the generals have made clear to Trump his options, and he has pressed forward. So as he
And I,
said, it was either him or it was. I think he said it was either. He said I warned Kamani twice, or they tried to get me, or something of that nature, and I got them. It's like I can understand that sentiment, but now you have basically opened Pandora's box in the Middle East, realistically.
and I
Uh,
want to add also that a very big part of the United States' strength is uh, the appearance of strength. If the United States were to lose a war against Iran, even if it doesn't mobilize as many forces as possible, it's going to be a bad look. The Middle Eastern countries will be thinking, well, they can't even mount this offensive and win against Iran. How can we trust them to defend us after they've already not defended us twice from these attacks in the first place? And we've actually got one of our favorite viewers, XNXXF, back in here, and I'm glad he's back in. And he said the reason Iran doesn't sink a carrier is just so the U.S. doesn't nuke Tehran. If the United States uses nukes, that's gonna change the entire global scale.
yeah,
Everyone is going to be like, okay, well, Russia's going to use them. China's going to use them. They're going to just be
yeah.
nuking whoever they want. There's a reason no one uses nukes. It's not because they can't. It's not because they don't. It's not because they don't want to.
I think it's
It's because the
mutually
moment
assured
they do,
destruction.
it's on the board. I mean,
Yeah, mutually assured destruction, man. That
I
you will
hate to use
everyone will
Fallout as an
destroy everyone.
example, but
Fallout's a great example, honestly.
yeah, I think Fallout's a great example. And it's just because it's true. The moment nukes get launched on one way, they're going to get launched every other way. And the Middle Eastern countries will not just sit down in South Asia. Pakistan borders Iran. They will not just sit aside to the side and be like, "Oh, well, we're fine dealing with millions of refugees from the country that we border that just got nuked."
I mean, and
No,
not to
that is going
mention
to be massive an issue,
the
even
fallout from
disregarding
the
the
nuke.
damage.
Like the fallout from the nuke itself and the regions around. I'm like, I was watching another video about how someone was breaking down the hold on, I just saw something. Something was breaking down the intensity and the overall damage that a nuke can do.
Yeah,
And just at first, like when it just like goes off, it's like literally just a ball of fire that incinerates everything. And then it obviously just pans out the mushroom cloud, the vacuum that gets created, all that stuff. They said if New York was basically hit, like it would just decimate all of the United States, of course. And then I think I was also watching some safe states that, like, if you're in these states, you're basically safe. Like anything past the Rockies, you're pretty much good,
yeah.
realistically, because it would have to
Well,
get over the Rockies. And then states
those
like,
mounds are protective. Yeah,
yeah, and then states like New Hampshire, Maine, like those three states up there, like I think it's what, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, right? That whole um, amalgamation up top. Those states would also be fine as well because they're not seen as high priority states. Where you have most in like the upper Midwest, they are states that do have a lot of ICBM missiles within the state. So those places would obviously be a few places that would get hit first, but overall, looking at the grand scheme of everything and how it's all played out on foreign policy, the Trump administration is going to have a lot to do. I mean, we have the continuation of what's going on in Ukraine as well. We know that Russia is stating they may want to make a deal with Ukraine after seeing things that have happened. Zelensky has asked his Arab countries, friends, to try to persuade Russia in those manners as well. So there
yeah.
could
From
be
what I recall,
additional things.
Zelensky said that that Ukraine would offer their
Yeah,
drone expertise and defense expertise against Iran if the Middle Eastern and European countries were to help it deal and make a truce deal with Russia to curb the violence.
exactly. And I mean, smart for them, obviously, because they need to get a deal that they've been waiting for. But yeah, it's I mean, every single hour, minute, second, there's always some new information coming out, and we always hope that our listeners come here to what they hope and what they find is the best source of information. This episode is only particularly going to focus on Iran. We have a slate of information for you guys on Wednesday, and we are setting up another special guest episode for a candidate within New Jersey. So definitely be on the lookout for all of our social media. Follow that tag at the bottom and stay engaged with us. And I was going to try to wait until Muhammad gets back so I do a little sign offage. But as always, to our listeners, thank you for tuning into Behind the Ballot, where we keep politics engaged, balanced, and informative. Stay curious, stay critical, and stay involved. I'm your host, Mikhail Jenkins. And until next time, keep looking beyond the headlines and behind the ballot.